GMODISM. Well, hello, it's your host Eric here of the GMODISM channel, and today it's finally time for an updated CRAM cannon tutorial. Is that not great? So, the CRAM cannon I made some tutorials of before, but finally we're gonna do an updated tutorial where I'm gonna go through basically everything you need to know to make some decent CRAM cannon turrets. So, to explain all of this, imagine a bucket, or not. Look at this bucket. This is a bucket. So to explain CRAM shells the best, we imagine the shell being a bucket. The size of the bucket is decided by how many gauge increasers you have on your CRAM cannon. The more gauge increasers you have on your CRAM cannon, the larger the bucket is gonna be. The minimal size of bucket is 1000 millimeters. The maximum size of the bucket is 2000 millimeters, okay? So that's like the size of the bucket, right? Now, what can we fill in this bucket? Well, to fill the bucket with scary things, we need to have packers. Packers is the thing that fills buckets. The packers fills the bucket with pellets. You got high explosive pellets, fragmentation pellets, EMP pellets, incendiary pellets, and ordinary pellets. And you can mix and match, have all of them, but at least one of them, and that type of pellet will fill the bucket. Beautiful. And that is what deals the damage. It's like funny powders that do these things in the bucket. And if you instead connect a lot of payload compactors to the packers, the payload compactors make sure that the pellets are packed more tightly. So they kind of make sure that you can pack a lot of pellets inside your bucket by making it more compact. And the more connections you have to, pellets, you basically increase the speed of filling the bucket. And the more connections you have to payload compactors, the more compact the packed pellets are, so they will be more powerful. Combining a big millimeter, like having some gauge increasers and a lot of payload compactors, make sure we have really powerful shells. Now, when all that is done, when these little packers have packed pellets at a certain amount of compactness, the shell is then being thrown away by this firing piece. And the firing piece needs a couple of barrels, not for propulsion, like the gunpowder propelling the shell is kind of already pre-decided. So it's only deciding, this thing is only deciding the accuracy. You need some barrel for accuracy. If you have like one, it will be shit accuracy, but yeah, you can do that too. And you know, CRAM cannons, it's a new, like everything in this game is basically a new minigame, like each system. So don't worry if you're confused in the beginning, everything will be clear in a little while. You may, for example, think a little bit about what do you mean with connections? Well, I'm going to show you some examples here. So here we have two CRAM cannons. We're just having the firing piece. And here we have 6-way connectors, 5-way, 4-way, 3-way, 2-way connectors. What these do is connecting things. So you can just have a couple of them here so you can connect things. And on this little connection rod, you can place stuff like packers, for example. So you can see here we have the suction cups here. The suction cups connect to the connector, and these little things sticking out, they will connect to pellets. And for this, it's like these little things sticking out connect to the suction cups here, you know. So just to get a understanding of it, we place one here and one here. So For example, if we want to have a hardener pellet, we are basically doing solid slugs. We can have a hardener pellet here. And if we for this side have a high explosive pellet, we can have one there. Now just have a barrel on each of them and we basically have a very rudimentary CRAM cannon. And if we just take a little look at these little cannons, you can see here that this cannon has packed of packed. We have 250 of 250. It has one type of pellet or one pellet, and it reloads every 253 seconds. Really slow reload time. Well, it's gonna be pretty weak. You can see here when we fire them in slow motion, we have a hardener pellet that destroyed a few blocks. Yes, indeed. CRAM is pretty powerful for its size, and we had a little bit of explosive here dealing some damage. Cool. So then you can see that they work fine. Now you can see it right now has a, it reloads every 256 seconds. That's not very good. So what if we put another pellet here? Well, then it reloads twice as fast, every 128 seconds. Now the thing is, packers are really cheap. They're like 25 materials. Pellets are really expensive. They're like 180 materials. So instead of putting another pellet here, we could just instead take this, align it so that it will connect and put it here. And it's the same thing. Now we have a reload speed of every 128 seconds. Isn't that quite nice? And we can do that a lot of times. We can actually have 6 connections per pellet, and it is actually the same as if we would have added 6 extra pellets, but for much less materials. So now you can see we need to do a lot. We need to use these connectors to make this crazy snake system. And now it reloads every 44 seconds, which is starting to be almost pretty okay for a CRAM cannon. So then we can look here and we already know, like, this shell is it's not more powerful. It's still 256 pellets. You can shoot it here. You can see it does the same type of damage. It's not very scary. So what if we want to make it scarier? Well, one thing we can do is we can increase the bucket, basically increase the shell size. And to do that, we can use some gauge increasers connecting to the CRAM connectors here. And now when you add, you can see packed 120 of 325. And if we add all along here until we have the max gauge, now we can see it's 1750. And there 1950, and there 2000 millimeters. Now you can see it's suddenly 4 times as large. Like, it now contains 1000 pellets. Unfortunately, the reload time is back at really high, like 172 seconds for reloading this. So we'll just click reload all to test the power here. And now you can see it does actually significant damage. This is now a scary CRAM shell. Now, if we want it to be even more powerful, well, one thing we can do is adding payload compactors so that the pellets will be packed a little bit more tightly in our big bucket. So adding one here, you can see it now connects to 2 connections. And that adds 100 pellets. So for each connection, now we have 2 more. That adds another 100. And if we have a place with a single connection, like here, you can see it unfortunately only adds 50. So this will add 50 pellet slots per connection. Now, You can spam payload compactors at less optimal places, because payload compactors, they're kind of cheap. They're like 25 materials too. Of course, it's better if they have multiple connections, because that will of course be lower cost in the long run. But when you need to think about maxing the connected packers for best efficiency material-wise, well, then you should be doing that with the pellets in particular. All the pellets have a pretty similar cost. They are 180 material, except the hardener pellet, which is slightly cheaper, 150 materials. Like that. And as said, you can mix and match. So if we put a little hardener pellet here, you can see this cannon now has a new setup, 1 hardener and 6 high explosive. That is the new setup. It will reload every 206 seconds because of course we added a lot of payload compactors, which is why it's really compact now. It now contains 1,400 pellets. But if we reload this thing and fire it, you can see it's legit scary now. We can just swivel this little thing, reload all, and we can just compare these two CRAM cannons. Bam! It now does significant damage. Now, why would you want to have hardener pellets at all? Why just not opt for explosive damage? Well, one of the reasons we want hardener pellets is that it makes the shell more resistant to being shot down by enemy CWIS systems and countermeasures. You can see that the shell health is now 6,720, and that's not a lot. But if we replace this with a high explosive pellet instead, it's now 5,040. So a lot of CRAM cannons, especially big CRAM cannons, actually have a lot of hardener pellets. Not that they need them, but just because they want to not be shot down. What happens if we switch places? What happens if we have a hardener pellet here with 6 connections and explosive here? Well, then we get a shell that has 15,000 health, which is a lot more. And explosive damage, naturally, is a lot less. But we now have an armor-piercing high explosive shell. It now goes into the target and explodes. Let's watch that again in slow motion. Goes into the target and explodes. Isn't that quite beautiful? Now, you may want to have some control on where the shell explodes. That's usually a good idea. So what we can do then is there is something called fusing box. And the fusing boxes can actually be placed on top of the gauge increasers, or of course along any one of these 6 connectors, 6-way connector or any of the other connectors. In the fusing box we have stuff like we can make the shell a hollow point. We can make a thing that explodes at a low altitude, at a higher, explode above. Time from launch, that is something we usually combine with a laser pointer thing. So for example, if you set it's not gonna be 10 seconds. If you go in here and slap a laser targeter somewhere on the cannon, same connection rules applies, and then it will basically blow up at the target. So if you're making an AA gun, you usually set it to time from launch plus this laser targeter, and it will explode around the enemy if it's fragmentation or high explosive, whatever you set it up. But inertial, if the angle changes, penetration depth, so we have said penetrated 10 blocks. or time from first impact. And you can actually have several of the fuses if you like, so that it explodes in case it starts to bounce and if it penetrated 10 meters deep. Now, there is a little bit of a drawback when you're using fuses, and that's that each fuse removes a little bit of health. You can see here, shell health 9,914, reduced by 280% by fuses. So basically, each fuse removes like 10% health of the shell. But now it will reliably explode inside the target 10 meters deep, or if it bounces and the angle changes. Personally, I think it's more reliable to set it time from first impact. So we kind of get a impact and then like 0.07 seconds, 0.03 or 0.09. It's usually what I do. It explodes after that. So if we just fire, you can see, bam, it now explodes here. By the way, CRAM shells are not exploded by explosive reactive armor. It doesn't work for CRAM shells for some reason. It even says here, triggers explosion of shells other than CRAM on contact. So ERA is like for anti-APS, not anti-CRAM. Now, there are some old things to know in From the Depths that people may tell you that's not necessarily true anymore. And to just disprove that and not have any argument, I'll just show everyone if you think it works in another way. It doesn't matter if you have like connection points shared by a compactor or a pellet. It's better that the packers share a pellet than that the packer share a compactor, but that's only for cost. If you go in here and look at the stats, you can hear material per firepower 11,000, and here material per firepower 800. Or not 11,000, I mean 1100. Yeah, so this is a little bit more efficient than this. That's the only difference. That the packers share a compactor doesn't change the properties. For the cannon, it only matters how many connections they have to a pellet or to a compactor. So here you can see one. So we have two connectors to a pellet and two connectors to a compactor. This is the same. We have one there, and we have two there. Yeah, so one here, one here. So this has two, this has one, this is one. These are exactly identical. Look at the stats here. You can see these cannons are exactly identical. This one is just a little bit more, material efficient. That's it. That's really it. And the cool thing with this little setup here is that this could be so much cheaper by having just multiple barrels. So, for example, if we put one here, then we put one here, and one here. This individual cannon here is the same. Like both of these cannons are exactly the same. Now, if you look at the stats, you will be a little bit confused because in the stats, the material per firepower is like 900 for this one, and the material per firepower is like 255 for this one. So this looks like it's a lot better, but it's not actually the case. It's just what cannon does it count towards. So if you want the material effectiveness on the stats here for material per firepower for a multi-barrel CRAM cannon, you actually have to go in, take the material per firepower and divide, like add that together for all the barrels the cannon has and divide that by the number of like barrels, you know? Yeah, so that's weird. But in any case, the setup with these two barrels is the same as this one. It's just that this one is a lot more efficient material wise. This one is like the worst and this one is like middle ground. Yeah, well, all of them are pretty weak, as you might imagine. because we are going to look at how to actually do proper 3D Tetris and all that. But before we went that direction, I just wanted to basically show you a little bit on what all this is about. But I feel that we should at least show what different types of damage types we have. We have frag, we have EMP, and we already looked at high explosive, so here we have incendiary. And these actually have settings. When you have incendiary, you can set it to be more intense, that is burn faster. You can set it to have oxidizer, that is also burn faster and burn underwater. And that has to be individually set up for each barrel. For EMP, there is nothing to set up, and for frag, you can go into the configuration, or the CRAM settings, I mean, and select if you want a narrow angle, like 10 degrees. We can actually take a look at that. If we fire here, it's a pretty narrow little thing. Now you can see this caused some damage here. Or if we set this one up to have a broad angle, like, or both of them need to be set up to have a... Oh, right, this is EMP. I forgot. Let us slow down time a little bit and basically reload and fire. Bam, that's a 180 frag. And I don't know where that EMP surge went. Maybe it didn't went anywhere, but you know, you've probably seen EMP damage. It basically applies EMP where it's being detonated. If it's penetration depth, great. If it's on the surface, probably not going to deal a lot of damage. But penetration depth EMP CRAMs can be like the noob one-shot killer weapon, because CRAM cannons generally are not stopped by armor. You have to like evade them to not get hit by them. They will usually actually hit you, you know. They are scary. Oh, and for the fun of it, what if we have just a hardener pellet? Well, that just, you know, goes through until it, you know, has no more damage to deal. It will just zoop, go through. Kinetic damage is like only 4,000 per CRAM shell here, why they are not successfully penetrating very deep until after a couple of shots. Oh, there we have the EMP surge from this cannon right here. The pellets also have nice markings on the side here, so they are easy to recognize. We have this triangle for frag, we have a circle for high explosive, we have a, well, square for incendiary, and we have a plus sign for hardener. Another old myth I'll need to remove here is that, well, sharing pellets between two different cannons like this offers no downside whatsoever. It's just, you know, better. Even if they share compactors, they don't share the compactor space. It like gets doubled. So before there was some disadvantage to using multiple barrel CRAMs like this, but that's not anymore. That is not anymore. You can share compactors and pellets all you like between different firing pieces, and there is no downside whatsoever. So if you don't believe me, just, you know, look at these stats, okay? All right, just a little quick rundown of components. We won't really cover much today. We have an interface screen. It's just like a shortcut to the firing piece. You know, you can go in here and I don't know. Yeah. You can set the required accuracy before fire here to lower like that, just like the other weapons. You can also set the maximum gauge here if you don't want it to be like if you have too many of the gauge increasers, but you actually want it to be 1998 millimeters, you can do that. If you wanted to go slower than the default 300 meters per second, you can lower the speed here. And if you wanted to like fire super fast, you can set the minimum packing to like 5% or something like that. So there is a term called Doom CRAM where it's basically set up to fire one shell and then it's gonna have a reload like time of like 10 minutes. And then you can set the minimum packing. The first shot is gonna fire at 100% packing, and then the next shot is gonna fire at 5% packing. This means that the shells will be really weak, but now you can see this cannon now fires every 9 seconds instead of every 140 seconds. However, like predictably, it's gonna be it's gonna be so weak when like 10 seconds has passed and we can fire this again. Like look at that, that's pathetic. So usually people fire their shells at 100% packing, but if you have some specific reason, you can make it fire at 5% packing or some other percentage you find nice. Only low is the default you should have, but I'm gonna show you a little bit on what prefer or only high is later. That is mortars. But in any case, inside here we have like a loadout menu, something where we can like swap the loadout of the cannon by changing these values. This is generally not a good idea to use, because you usually mess something up when you use this. So for most CRAM cannon builders, the reconfigure loadout menu is the area where you accidentally destroy your weapons. Basically, never use this. Right. You can set the shell tracer to like another color if you like care. You can do that. I don't know. It can be cool sometimes, but it's really just cosmetic. Then we have something called fall of shot predictor. Predictor is just called. It basically, when you go into the cannon here and you like manually aim, you can like see a prediction of where the cannon is gonna land. And, you know, that can be useful if you fire the cannon manually and don't have an AI computer to calculate where it's gonna fall. So if you're like relying on full manual aiming, that's useful to have. That means it's basically pretty useless, but yeah. And these gauge increasers are just different shapes with different looks. There is no difference other than the connection points they have, which is pretty obvious when you look at them. They connect like in whatever amount of ways they will say they connect. That is like this, not like this. Cool thing with these, however, is that they will connect to each other. So yeah, that's useful. You can like build connection structures with these. All right, let's get into some 3D Tetris building. And this platform, the Build Platform Mark III, is downloadable if you want it. Inside of here, we have some decent, helpful build help things. So generally, if you don't want it, there is something similar here. You can see some different sizes of turrets, basically. You have it in here in the sub-objects template. But if you want this little thing, it's on the workshop. You'll find it easily. So this is some build helpers to build turrets of said sizes. So let us dive in here and build a D13 or D11. Let's go with the D11. So this is diameter 11. The white area is the outline of the turret, the utmost edge we can have on it, not including turret armor. The green space is where the turret like well armor could be, and the red spaces is where nothing can be if we want this turret to be able to spin around inside of here. we are going to start a new sub-object, and just to make it a little bit simple, we're going to ignore some steps here, and we're just going to slap on this, not care about the difficulties of EMP, and just add a little normal body frame in this little area here. Or actually, I cannot not care about EMP. Who am I kidding? I care a lot about EMP. So we're going to do like this. We are going to have an EMP thing here, EMP secured. We're going to have a backup one here if it gets shot down. So one is going to be EMP secured, the other one is not, basically. So what I have done here is I basically made a little thing where this one is vulnerable to EMP. And in this space, we're going to have a surge protector. So surges will go here instead. And around this little local weapon controller, which is hopefully an all-in-one local weapon controller, yes it is, we should surround it with rubber. And to completely make it be protected, we need to have a rubber block on top here, which will mess up our Tetris a little bit, but whatever, I'm doing this properly now. And the thing I usually do is for one of the turrets, I decrease the priority / increase it for the other one, so that they can control them, but have different, you know, different like priorities, yeah. In any case, this is now a turret base, which is now within this white area, as you can clearly see. Why, you may wonder? Well, because, you know, CRAM cannons, they are not the most expensive cannon, but you still want some armor around it. So it's pretty smart to think about that it should be able to have some armor when you're making the Tetris. There are a few different ways to make CRAM cannon Tetris, and I'll show you the simplest way first. This is actually nothing I recommend. I think it's better to learn proper Tetris from the get-go, but, well, you do you. This is the 2D Tetris. You probably heard the term 2D Tetris or 3D Tetris being thrown around. Well, I'll show you what this is. So here we have a typical diamond shape of this type of Tetris. And what you basically do is you take your little prefab tool and you make this 3 by 3, and then you can basically overlap these so that they are sharing Tetris like this, sharing pellets, you know, in a smart little neat way, not like that, but like that. And then you can basically, oh look there, we can actually have one. It has 3 connections, better than nothing. And when you have the correct like elevation of the turret, let's say, so we're just going to make it a bit like this, and we're gonna make it a bit taller, ignore that extra rubber, and then we're going to take these and connect all these columns together, and we can then connect the columns to a firing piece, and now you have a CRAM cannon that reloads every 4 seconds. CRAM cannons is usually best reloaded at, I think it's like every 23 seconds, but it's basically a span where like from 20 is kind of the fastest reloading CRAM cannon you should have to make it effective, and 40 is like the highest for practical applications. To make it fire a little bit less fast and thus be more effective, we can add a couple of payload compactors at the less optimal spaces. And for like 2D Tetris like this, pretty inefficient. We don't need to be very calculated. We can obviously replace, by holding shift, some of the columns here of hardeners with payload compactors until we have a reasonable level. Every 7 seconds, still too fast, but fast enough for, you know, showing you. By the way, I didn't show you this. This is the bomb chute. It's useless except if you make a CRAM bomber. It basically fires a shell at a super slow speed, 40 meters per second, but at great accuracy. If you were wondering. But in any case, we should now first time take a look at the barrels here a little bit properly. We have the regular barrel, which is great for adding accuracy, but if we add too many barrels like this, you can see that the rotation speed is like 2 degrees every second, which is too slow. If we want to make that a bit faster, we need to use the motor-driven barrel. They are in different variants, which you can piece together so it kind of looks cool, but that doesn't really matter. But if you add them, they will move faster, now 10 degrees per second. You can see, however, that the max barrel elevation is 35 degrees, and the max barrel azimuth is also 35 degrees. We don't need that. We don't really need that. We only need the elevation, not the azimuth, because this is on a turret. So for this reason, there exists something called elevation barrel, also available in different variants which you can care about or not. And if you add a couple of these, it will kind of remove degrees from the azimuth and put them on the elevation. So now it suddenly goes 75 degrees in elevation and just 5 degrees in azimuth, which is kind of much more reasonable. Now, if you look at the stats here, you can see the detection range of this shell is 396 meters, so the enemy can detect them from about that range, dependent on a lot of factors, of course, but whatever. Now, there is a little block we skipped over here, flash suppression barrel. If you put this on, or actually anywhere, the effect doesn't stack, so you can have 2 of them with no added benefit, but if you have 1 of them, at least, you get a stealthy shell. So it's now only detected 198 meters from the enemy, which may very well be so close it will not be able to react. And that's kind of the little setup here. Now it comes with a downside, and that is the shell speed is now decreased to 240 instead of 300. If you build a really small ship and you suffer recoil issues, well, there is something called the recoil suppression barrel. And this comes in end variants, which you have to use at the end of your barrel, or they also come in variants that you can use in the middle. So you can see here that the recoil is decreased the more of these we add. However, the shell speed is also further decreased too. So if you have too many of them, the shell is now only 160 meters per second, basically almost closing in on hull speed, the regular CRAM cannon. So basically, recoil suppression barrels is only usable if you actually have problems with recoil. If your ship is like tilting over every time you fire your CRAM cannons, you'll need to add them until you don't have that problem anymore. Now, usually we build pretty large CRAM cannons, so this is not really a problem, but if it is a problem, that's the solution. And that's basically everything you need to know about barrels. There is a variant called heavy barrel, and just like for APS, it is the same as a regular barrel. The only thing is that this thing has health that is like a little bit more. It's one, yeah, it has slightly more armor as well. It's not very sturdy, but it's a little bit more sturdy. Yeah, so it can be a good idea to have those as the closest thing to the firing piece, since we don't want to lose them. Unfortunately, they also decrease the barrel rotation speed by quite a bit, so make sure that the barrel is not turning too slow. And if it is, get the motor-driven barrels. Here, just add more a few more motor-driven barrels, and it will be suddenly be more agile. And the regular barrels also have this nice little effect that they add accuracy. They make it more accurate, the CRAM shell. So like a long barrel friend like this, for example, has a inaccuracy that is pretty low. Go here. Yeah, down there at the bottom you can see inaccuracy, and if we add this long rod, it's now 0. Very small. No, 0.29. And if we make it a lot longer, you can see it goes down to, I guess, CRAM cannons are not that accurate. If you, however, have an enormous problem with your CRAM cannons and they're just never accurate at all, and you just wanted to have self-guided CRAM cannons, well, there is actually, you're in luck. What you need to do then is just grab some motor-driven barrels, some elevation one, and then just a few normal barrels. You don't need to have a very long one. Then you go into the CRAM cannon, and instead of only low, you set it to only high. And at this case, it may actually be a good idea to not have the shell speed too high. So why not remove some recoil and put a flash suppression barrel on there? If you do this, you have the fantastic little... You have the fantastic thing of having a mortar. Now, if we want to have a proper mortar, however, this is a good idea to add some high explosive pellets instead. And on here somewhere, put a fusing box and have a low altitude fuse, making it explode like 5 meters in the water or whatever. And you can just watch this thing. Watch this thing go, basically, with a little marauder. And it will now fire up in the air here. We can just spam reload it a little bit. And in the air, up above somewhere, they will eventually turn down here, go towards the marauder and hit it. Now, the really cool thing with this is that when you fire them at a high arc like this, the likelihood that you will hit is so extremely low that the game gives you the fantastic gift of having slightly guided shells. You can like basically see them move in the air. If you look at a really high altitude, you can basically see them move. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. This is a pretty small and very weak cannon, however, but yeah, you can see they are now exploding below the water, and I mean, they are doing some damage sometime. But by the way, if you're gonna have mortars, do 180 frag instead, not explosive. Just a little tip. This is not a mortar tutorial, just a general one. And this is 2D Tetris, which I don't even recommend. So let's start with the proper Tetris. And this is a point where you need to be really like smartsy pants / sit and think for a long time. And when you basically found out nice patterns, what you do is you should probably like, you know, save the Tetris. You can see these are like some example of Tetris, which can be stacked like this. And these are also colored to better see which, what is what basically, which can be a smart idea when you do Tetris, because otherwise it may be a little bit confusing to see what is what, especially when you're working with minimized mode with like the P menu, the P mode, which minimizes or makes the block small like this. Yeah, but I'm going to show you how to make such a Tetris, and the Tetris is obviously going to be quite dependent on what type of space you have to work with. There are a couple of different types of Tetris, by the way. So some use 6 connection Tetris, which I showed you a little bit briefly as an example, where you basically try, for each pellet, you try to have 6 packer connections. There are some more effective, space-effective variants, which are called 5 connection Tetris, which basically opts to connect 5 to each Tetris like this, where you can make it a lot more space efficient instead. I'm going to show you a pretty classic Tetris. There is an infinite amount of variants, of course, but that is the fun of From the Depth. So, as said, look at different connectors, connection points to see where they are located. Then we're going to work with this thought thing where we have like one middle layer and one top layer. The middle layer will have connections up and down and never like the connection layer will have connections up and down, as said, and will never contain any pellets usually. They look like we have this, for example. So we have a connection up and down. We're just going to have that here. And then in the middle layer, we have connections to all the cardinal directions like this. So we have 4 connections like this. And of course, above this is going to go another identical connection layer. So this is how to make a stackable Tetris. And that is how you make it without losing your mind. Now, when we make CRAM cannons for battleships and big things, they have to have a lot of health. They have to have so much health that's passing like 100,000 health. Otherwise, they're just not going to work. So, the largest amount of pellet we usually have for really big cannons is actually hardener pellets. So, that is why we use hardener pellets when we build our little Tetris here. Now, I'm going to do as I said before, and I'm going to color these. The pellets, I'm going to color red here. The packers, I'm going to color yellow here so we can see them more easily. And I'm going to choose green for the connection layers. So to connect these to each other in a reasonable way, we need to have connection points at places. And if you remember, here is the suction cups is where we can put these said 6-way connectors or other way connectors. The thing that is not the 6-way connector is usually really good to have when you're building turrets that are multi-barrel and you don't want these systems to interconnect with each other when you have basically connection snakes going. But other than that, when we're doing a single barrel CRAM cannon, it's usually best to have just 6-way connectors because that's easier. So here is an obvious space that we need to connect. And we also need a connection to go up and down properly in a reasonable way. And we need to be able to connect blocks being placed around this. This is a place where it's good to enable symmetry plane. This needs to be connected downwards and upwards so that each layer is connected. These are usually made up of connection pillars that go through the entire structure. Now, here is a prime example where we can have another pellet, which also has 2 connections from this side, which means we can have one of these, a packer, here and here too. Now this makes it have 4 connections here as well. Then we'll need to find a way to make it also have a packer that's going up and down. So for example, we could have a packer that's going to go up and down here, for example. And that needs to be connected or locked then with another of these, which can go here. So note that this has a connection downwards and upwards. So when we copy this layer to above here, this is going to have 6 connectors. This is going to have 6 connections, which is what we want ideally. We can copy paste small diamond patterns and stuff like that when we're doing Tetris, but do keep in mind that when we do that, you may miss the specific intricacies of your turret. So ideally, I actually recommend you to hand build a little layer like this for each size of turret that you want to have. Right, so we just continue here. Here we have this one. We should have 2 connectors here. We should be able to have another one here. Beautiful. Then we just take this little thing, connect it up there and there. And we already know that this needs to be connected up. Probably it's going to be here. It can depend a little bit. Maybe it's going to be in this direction. We'll see. That is to be decided. We need a connection going up and down, so we turn it this way and put one here. So this is now fixed. And now we put one here, so this is now fixed. Now these two obviously need more connections, and here we had another place where we should have another one here. And then it basically goes on like this. This needs to go here. That limits our options to give a connection point to this one. And probably this is gonna make it a bad spot. So we're gonna see exactly how we're gonna connect this up. Just like that. Let's say we connect it like this. And we then go and have some 6-way connectors. This is gonna be a pillar here. And here you can see this one is going to be hard to connect. So here we basically need to rethink the Tetris a little bit. How are we going to do this now? Well, then we need to connect it to something else. Now my Corsair keyboard decided to mess up the inputs. Well, yeah, but basically this is like our first, so to say, hurdle. How do we do this? Well, then we're going to put this an optimal place to place a compactor. So remove this, we'll tilt this to another direction, because remember they can connect to this side as well, so they could connect here. And up and down here, we could, for example, have compactors instead. So then we just need to make sure it's connected up to here by just adding some of these, just like that. For this example layer, we will need to remove this little rubber block here just to make and find out the best Tetris we can have. Now we're gonna put that back later, so like the Tetris for the bottom layer will not be optimal like for the other layers, but we need to make it sure we have a copy pastable area basically. And usually you need to use the P menu to kind of see clearly where you are placing stuff. But as said, remember to connect them up and down as well. So this one, for example, needs a connection up and down like that. And it can then be connected to this one here. And then you also get these interesting areas where you can see, oh, this only has one connection and this packer isn't providing anything more. Could we change it to another direction so it provides more connections? Then the answer is usually yes. And here you can see we have a free little packer connection too. So then what we do is we turn this in a way so that this space now is perfect for having a compactor. So we are going to select this color and add a new color for the compactors. So this compactor now has a connection this direction, which means that each one of these will have 3 connections. And that is optimal. 3 connections for them. This one isn't possible to move in any other direction to get more. These will have 2 each at least, which is okay. Not perfect, but definitely okay. This thing is connected, but in this area we can see we actually have no connection to this. Okay, so here we seem to have a space where we can't turn anything to get some extra connections, possibly. but we do have access to a CRAM connector. So no pellets can be connected here, but the CRAM connector is present here. But we can't add another packer to get a new connection of any kind. What do? This is a perfect space to have a gauge increaser. This gauge increaser will now provide to the general mix of gauge. Usually you want to have 2000 millimeter, and then it's good to have it baked into the Tetris, so you don't need to put all these blocks around the barrel. We are going to continue to see if we can twist the blocks to provide more connections to stuff. This one is, of course, not able to twist in any direction, which means that this is where we need to have a payload compactor. Now is the question, is this possible to twist in any direction to get an extra? Well, we could do that. We could actually twist it in this direction to have a connection to the side like that. But instead, it may be a better idea to here place a new payload compactor, just like that. It will only have one connection, so it's debatable if that is the most efficient thing to do. Nerding down on the details, but you can see here we have one connection to a compactor here, one connection here, and one connection here. Now, we could actually improve the connections if we took this thing and twisted it to the side. We still have the up and down connection. It's still going to be connected to this little CRAM connector. And it will now provide two connections. And if we twist this in this direction, or I mean in this direction, then we lose the connection to the pellet above, which is a non-negotiable. So we can twist it in this direction, and we got 1, 2, we got 3 here, and then we can basically remove this. So we have, well, without the symmetry plane, that is. It has to be asymmetric like that. It is now slightly more effective, even though we may not use that instead. But now we can instead put a gauge increaser here to provide that connection. But now this is like the hellscape of doing 3D Tetris. But now we actually got a new problem. This is not connected to anything. So this is now a large issue. We now have internal pieces which is not going to be connected in this 3D Tetris here. So then we need to add more connections and stuff, which will of course take space. So then we need to back a little bit and think again. And this is basically what you have to do. 3D Tetris isn't easy, but it's very satisfying when you crack it. So I would suggest doing some practicing. You at least have the basics on how to do it now. But of course, watching 3D Tetris being recorded live is completely excruciating. But I hope I showed you enough of like the tools you need to actually do it. Anyways, areas where you don't have too many connections, but still some, it can be a good idea to use those for payload compactors like this. This will have 1, 2 connections there. And as said, this one is now actually not connected to anything, which means that it will need to be connected to one of the sides at least. Then the other side, we don't need to have a connection because it's enough if it's on one of the sides. We can then use this area instead of giving, or this side instead of having an extra connection to these payload compactors. You can clearly see that we can provide a lot of detail and a lot of customization. We can really do some pretty decent cannons, but it takes time and it takes patience, which I'm sure you understand. Well, here you can see we have a perfect place of having one of these, another little packer which gives us a double connection place with a 3 connection when we connect it up to another payload compactor. So at times you can't actually have it be a completely symmetry plane. You sometimes have to remove the symmetry plane to get enough connections. And even if we have only one connection, it can a lot of the times be worth it for connecting up pellets or compactors, because of course, what else should we do with the space? We could use the space to add more gauge increasers. That we could also do, but that's like the options. And you need to dive inside the structure to kind of see where you don't have anything, where you have empty spaces, and see what could you connect up here. So for example, for this pellet, for some reason we accidentally deleted this packer, so that needs to be connected back up. Make sure it is actually connected up so that it will be connected to each of the layers. And here we have again a dead space. So we'll add something to this dead space. And here we can see we can't connect up anything here. So we add a gauge increaser to this dead space too. And we basically go through it, make sure that everything is as optimal as we can make it. And then you just basically fill out the space to the best of your ability. Now, my design philosophy is like, it's better to fill it with something useful than to leave it empty. So each one of these blocks are filled with something possibly useful in these types of little clusters here. Now you get to know if your Tetris is bad or not. You can just remove the outside armor for a while, which can be added back later. Now you will basically take the prefab tool, copy this thing, make sure that the symmetry plane is off, and now you can stack this. Now you will basically be able to see if this worked or not, if you did a Tetris that's actually usable. So each of the connection columns, take them and connect them to each other. Like this. I just put a little space here so we can clearly see them in between. So it will be easier to troubleshoot. To this little connection, we will then go and connect a firing piece. Now, single barrel CRAM cannons are usually better than like multi-barrel CRAM cannons, except when the cannons are really small. So if you're building super small cannons, you can actually have multi-barrel turrets to get a lot of packing for free, since each firing piece basically comes with 250 packs free. But when you're building larger turrets like this, it is better to have a single barrel turret because it will be much stronger. Now, let's see what we got here. We can now reload all and see what type of beast we have created. This reloads every 48 seconds, so it's on the slower side. It's 2000 millimeter. We have enough of the gauge increasers built in to reach the max gauge. We have a shell health of 165,000, which is pretty decent. Now this again, this is just a penetrative slug. The only way we could make this do a considerable damage is make it a hollow point shell, but usually we want to have armor piercing, high explosive, or frag. But in any case, if you want to know if you made a good cannon or not stats wise, you'll just go into it and look at the stats, and you can then judge it by material per firepower. And the more, like the lower the material per firepower is, the better the turret basically is. considering it has enough health to actually reach the target. Now, what you may do here is to go into the P menu and actually make sure that everything is connected as you wanted it to be connected. Then it's also a good time to enable where you decide how high this turret is gonna be under the deck. So say this is gonna be like 12 meters under, then this is a pretty reasonable height of it. And the more you repeat this pattern, you're gonna have a very similar type of metric. Like it's just gonna be stronger, but it's not gonna change very much the reload. Now, to put back the rubber you removed, you of course need to put that back so that your local weapon controller is EMP secured. And then you'll just check and make sure that this didn't break anything. Doing this didn't break anything. And you can also go into the structure, and if you, for example, want to have a faster reload speed, you can look at some of the payload compactors which are in here that have a reasonable amount of connections. Now, each pellet should ideally have 5 or 6 connections, at a minimum with 4, but really it's up to you, and it's also up to how efficient you really want to make it. Here, as you can see, this thing is connected to the side like that, and on the bottom plane, it's not going to connect to anything downwards, which it would have otherwise perhaps have done. So then we can take this and turn it around like that. So it now has connections to both of the sides. It's going to be a little bit more effective there. And this is a CRAM connector, and you can see this is like not optimal orientation for it. So then we need to take a look. It's gonna be error in symmetry here, so we can add the symmetry plane back. And then we can actually take these and reorient them so that they are to the sides here, and we're gonna get a more powerful turret. Same for this, only one connection. Doing like that, it now has 2 connections. So there we could already see something with our Tetris that was a little bit off that could be improved. And that's what you need to do. You need to go through the Tetris, make sure you can improve everything you can improve. This has 3 connected packers, and I'm gonna decide this is good enough. So here I am actually going to add some hardener pellets. I'm gonna color them red so we can see them more easily. And I'm gonna look for other payload compactors that have 3 connectors and adding some hardener pellets here to make it reload faster. Now, this is going to decrease the overall effectiveness in the stats of the turret, but it is also going to make it, as said, reload faster, which is what I wanted in this case. 2 connectors, that is too little. Looking for some other payload compactors which I could possibly replace. Here we have 3 here. Okay, I'm gonna add some there and just go over that. And since the hardener pellets is a little bit cheaper than the other pellets, we want to go into the structure and look for the ones with the 6 connectors. And these are the ones we want to replace with whatever we want to have as payload. So this we're gonna replace with explosive pellet, this one as well. And I want to have a little bit of fragmentation too, so I'm gonna replace this one with a fragmentation. This has 6, I'm gonna replace it with a fragmentation. So this is how we do. And then we can go over to the cannon again, and we can see that the reload time is now 42 seconds, which is much more reasonable. Then when you have configured the cannon to your wishes, make sure of the elevation you want it to be over. This is like 12 meters. So let's say this is the elevation it's gonna go over then. We can then start to build on where we want the turret head to be. It's gonna be a little bit elevator, or is it gonna be at the elevation per se? So this is 12 meters. It's gonna be sticking up just over here. So let's say we usually want to have the firing piece a little bit back in the turret so that it doesn't get damaged first of the blocks. Now, what you want to do, of course, is we can remove this little connection layer here and instead look at whatever is sticking up, because we want to make sure we had some packers connected to the pellets and whatnot sticking over the surface here. So we'll just take some of these wherever we have a pellet to connect, just like that. And now we get an area which we can again put in some more payload compactors in to really fill out the space. Well, making sure that they are all interconnected, of course, in a reasonable way. Just like that, it looks like it's gonna work. This is not gonna be a place where we can connect up. Doesn't matter. That will be empty. And this will go there. And this can go here. And now we can finally take the connection lines and find all of them and connect them to each other. And we can make the connection layer have some extra like connection spots. So we have some interconnectedness because each of the connectors are only costing 5 materials. And by doing this way, we will add some redundancy to the cannon. And in this fashion, we now get our final results of a reload time of 38 seconds. And this is where the CRAM is going to protrude. Now, it's time to develop the barrel. And the barrel, as said, you can have a couple of heavy close to it to protect the barrel a little bit, even though it doesn't make a huge difference. Then we can have some regular barrel. And we need to have a bit of motor-driven barrel. And it doesn't matter which way you tilt these, because they're gonna be the same. It's just for cosmetics. And we need a couple of elevation barrels as well, in order for the turret to be, well, able to aim a little bit more upwards than it otherwise would have. Just like that. And add them like this, perhaps. 75 degrees looks good. And then we can basically see 9 degrees per second. That's pretty good. We can add until we have a little bit lower. 7 degrees per second should be acceptable. Now we have a pretty short barrel turret like this, which we'll be able to aim and shoot at naval targets and stuff like that. Now you can of course take a layer of this Tetris, a layer which represents not the bottom layer, but because that's going to be a little bit inaccurate, but a section from the middle here. And I recommend you that you save this down as a little armor example, or as a little example of how to make a turret. Now, the armored version of the D11 is actually the size of a D9 CRAM or any type of turret. So we're gonna save it as that. T9 CRAM turret Tetris 1 barrel support. So if you have it many layers that are like separatable, you basically have a different type of if you can separate the different barrels and have them even, I name them in such a way so that you can easily understand that's what it is. Well, in any case, now it's time to add the armor back so that our turret is a little bit protected against incoming fire and whatnot. If you really value your turret, you can have heavy armor, but for lightness, I'll choose to have alloy for most designs that are CRAM cannons. CRAM is one of the cheaper weapons. Having one single connection point go to the firing piece can be a weak point, which is why I usually like to add some extra connection points to the firing piece. And also remember that you may want a laser targeter, but you most definitely want a fusing box to your turret. So you can add a fusing box. Now if we look at this cannon here, we're gonna lower the accuracy before fire here. We're gonna see the CRAM settings. Fragmentation will be set to usually like pretty high, 250 it's gonna be. Can look nice to have a little bit of idle elevation. It's gonna be set to only low because of course. We're gonna reconfigure the loadout here. Absolutely not, that's a joke. Don't use this menu because this will mess it up if you forgot that already. And why not use a nice little custom tracer here? Yes, beautiful color. Good. Now what basically remains is just providing armor to the turret. But that I'm sure you can do yourselves. We have basically covered all steps of CRAM cannon. How to build them, how they work, and stuff like that. One thing that can be useful, however, to know, of course, is that the barrel is here and you are fully free to build it over like this, and this will not limit the movability when it comes to CRAM cannons. Now, that may be different dependent on what weapon system you're using, but as for CRAM cannons, that is not going to be an issue. But let us just test the firepower of this. Let's set it to a time from first impact, 0.09, and we are going to shoot it at this target. It's in God mode. Let us fire again. Bam, bam, boom. Pretty powerful little CRAM cannon. And the material per firepower for the finalized turret is 593, which is good but not epic. Some people get it down to like, I think it's 300 something, or I don't know. There are people that are a lot better on building CRAM Tetris than me, but it's basically just raw brain power. So, you know, sit there and think out a beautiful CRAM Tetris solution, and you are basically on your way on becoming a human math machine or something like that. Well, I hope you thought this video was useful, and if you did, please leave a like. I just want to say big thanks to all the supporters of the channel. It's very helpful the beginning of the year, because YouTube monetization is going down each beginning of each year, because that's just how it works. And anyways, special thanks to Chancellor, Super Dave, Admiral Dragon X62, Commodore the All-Around Gamer, Commander Ali, Ben Welke, Cameron Dixon, DLFN, Sven van der Velde, Anto, Cravey, or Lieutenants Anto, Cravey, Fleurs Dagon, Danley Sakin, Owen, Parba, Grid, Vincent Veritas, Volkite, Rick Pearl, Scooby Rocks, and all the cadets and everything and everyone in the ecclesiarchy of GMODISM. You will have to excuse me, but I'm getting a little bit tired. In any case, big thanks for watching this little video, and I'll see you in future ones. This is your host, Eric, of GMODISM Empire, and we're signing out. I hope I see you next time, and yeah, please like the video if you enjoyed it. Definitely.